Hello, friends and neighbors, and welcome back to the poem of the day for today, Tuesday, September 16th, 2025. And again, this is the second time recording this. There was another error with the audio. It kept all the video, but then you would have seen me just mouthing silently and gesticulating madly without anything to listen to. So I'm recording it again. And as in the past, as frustrating as those things can be, I think it's a nice incidental invitation to both reread and reconsider the poem, but also just to slow down. Often doing something again is an invitation to it's a reminder that we don't do things to just check them off. We do things to be present in the moment. And so this is an invitation for me to realize that and to have that philosophy for myself. So something else you'll notice, I sound a little bit today. I think it's allergies with the seasons changing, and the weather here has been very up and down. We sort of began fall, and then we're having this weird spike of summer heat again, and the trees and the grass don't seem to know what to do. So I've been a little bit sniffly and a little bit more nasally than usual today. So please pardon me there, especially if I have to sniffle during the video today. So today we're going to read another poem like the one yesterday that is going to be about loss and dealing with loss. However, this one is less personal and emotional and less centralized. Yesterday's poem was about a single person looking for a beloved that they lost, a sort of master or mentor figure for them whom they loved dearly. This one is far more objective and anonymous and opaque and I think wide reaching. It feels epic despite its short length. This poem's historical without being specific, and I'll mention that in a moment. And it also has to do with The Fall, which was another series of poems that we looked at a couple weeks ago. So the poem that we're doing today is The Death of a Soldier, and it was written in 1923 by Wallace Stevens in his collection Harmonium. And the thing about Wallace Stevens, he's considered one of the great American poets, perhaps of all time, but certainly of the last century. And as a member of the modernist movement, well, first, he was very prolific. I'm going to read from the collected poems of Wallace Stevens, and this collection goes some 600 pages. So he's very, very prolific, but there is not really a consistency that I've been able to find to his poems in terms of topics that they consistently focus on or styles that they consistently adhere to, as you would see with someone like Emily Dickinson or, as when we read Shakespeare's sonnets. And what that does, I think, is it makes him incredibly impressive for his ability to vary and experiment with style and structure to meet the content and the needs of what he was trying to discuss and depict. Additionally, it makes each poem kind of its own new adventure. With Emily Dickinson, you could sort of get a sense of what her style was and what her concerns were, and you can just sort of apply that in different variations to a lot of her poems. For Stevens, I kind of don't know what he's doing from one poem to the next, and I admire him as a poet, but I also am often left very confused and feeling like I need to go back and read it, and that I have observations, but I'm kind of still settling on what the overall impact of the poem is going to be for me. Just another example is The Emperor of Ice Cream, which I find to be a exciting poem, but a very puzzling poem. I've read it multiple times. I've been tested on it. I have given it to students just kind of for fun. And I have some observations about it, but when you get to a yeah, but so what? I don't know if I have a yeah, but so what for that one just yet, but hopefully I can get there as I continue to explore his work further in the future. Without further ado, we will go to Death of a Soldier today by Wallace Stevens from Harmonium, published in 1923. Life contracts, and death is expected. As in a season of autumn, the soldier falls. He does not become a 3 days personage, imposing his separation, calling for pomp. Death is absolute and without memorial, as in a season of autumn, when the wind stops. When the wind stops, and over the heavens the clouds go, nevertheless, in their direction. All right. I actually read the poem differently than I did on the previous video. I'm not sure if it was better this time or worse, but I paused in different places, and I'll talk a little bit about that in just a moment. From a structural standpoint, this poem has 4 stanzas. Each one is 3 lines long. So we have tercets. However, there's no rhyme scheme. And as far as I can tell, there's no consistent meter. Each of the stanzas begins with its longest line first, its middle line second, its shortest line third. So just visually, if you can see it, it kind of has a bar graph slant to it with each of the stanzas. But again, I can't find a, like, every third line has this many syllables to it that I've been able to determine. And the poem moves all over the place. Within the first line, we have life and death. We go death, life, death. And that first line is so packed. A lot of these lines are very, very packed. And what I mean by that is that even though each line ends with punctuation, often a comma, sometimes a period, there are actually only 3 sentences in this entire poem, he doesn't, as Shakespeare would often do, linger for a quatrain on an idea, unfolding it, unspooling it, developing it. A lot of these ideas are a single line long or sometimes half a line long, and we're not given much space to think. You have to go back on your own and isolate that idea within that particular line. Looking at the first one, not only are we moving life to death, but we have contracts has like a double meaning to it, right? It can contract like to go back, like a muscle contracts, or it could be contracts, like to sign something up, to bind something within an agreement. And so it asks us to think of life as a contract that expires and that runs out, and then death comes essentially to collect. Within that first line also, we begin in active voice. Life contracts, and then it sort of dies because we move into passive voice. Death is expected, leaving us to wonder who is expecting the death. I think the answer is all of us, but the answer within specificity is the soldier who's mentioned in the third line. The second line is as in a season of autumn. And autumn and falls at the end of lines 2 and 3 create kind of a triple meaning within falls. So fall with autumn as a synonym of autumn. Soldier falls as in, you can imagine being shot, falling over in war. But also there's a connotation there of the biblical fall, man's fall, the expulsion from Eden. And as far as I know, Stevens was not a particularly religious poet, but as a modernist, he's going to play with a lot of these allusions, biblical allusions, mythical allusions, allusions to other elements of culture. And from my experience with reading him, he throws them in there enough to tease you into thinking that they are significant and to allow you to kind of spiral somewhere. But then he doesn't unite them all in a satisfying way that makes it feel like you were truly onto something. And that's not to say that he's playing with us the way postmodernists would do, but just that he kind of will drop it there and is like, see what you make of that. And it's probably significant, but if you don't pick up on it, You'll hear, you'll hear then that in the fourth line, we have another sideways allusion to religion, to Christian religion. He does not become a 3 days personage. And so that makes us think of the 3 days that Christ was dead in the New Testament, from Friday into Sunday. But we're told that he's not like that, right? This is just an ordinary average person. There's nothing sanctimonious or heaven-like or transcendent about him. In fact, he doesn't even have a name. We have death of a soldier. And without all of this, the soldier is objective and anonymous. And so is the poem. The poem is something that feels recognizable, similar, familiar. It feels almost epic despite its briefness. And yet it lacks a specific war or a specific person that it's tied to. So it's gesturing towards a general shared history, but one that is not precise in its detail. So it could sort of belong to anyone. We then get imposing his separation, calling for pomp. So the soldier is unlike the 3 days person, unlike Christ, whose rising from the dead imposes a certain separation, I suppose, right? Boldening that line of life and death, but also boldening the line of God and man. And it does not call for pomp. No one will really remember him. There will be no ceremony to celebrate this. Because halfway through, line 7, we get death is absolute and without memorial. That is such a strong and cold statement. It kind of doesn't give any time to argue, any time to pull it apart. It just tells us that no matter what, death cannot be reversed, and no matter what you do to try to remember someone, it's kind of just pomp. It's just for you. It doesn't do anything. Line 8 then is as in a season of autumn, which is the exact same line as line 2. When the wind stops, right? As in the season of autumn when the wind stops. So the simile seems to be connecting the wind stopping to death being absolute and without memorial. So I think the wind here is life, is movement. We get a repetition then of lines 8 and 9, the beginning of line 9, when the wind stops and over the heavens the clouds go nevertheless in their direction. So wind stops when life stops in autumn or in the fall. Then we get this confusing image of over the heavens the clouds go. Now, why I'm confused about this is that typically when we think of the clouds, and this is not literally, this is just from a symbolic perspective, that the clouds signify heaven, right? You watch a sports player hit a home run, they cross home plate, they point up at the heavens, right? Some people, when they address their parents who have passed away, they might, or they say so and so's looking down on us. But we think, little kids draw these pictures and we think that the clouds are kind of the barriers of heaven, that people in heaven are walking or bouncing on the clouds. But here, the clouds are over the heavens. And I think that suggests that this thing that moves without life and this thing that overshadows or that blocks out light is above our concept of heaven, that the concept of heaven is something that's still separated from whatever celestial, if there is anything there at all. That's why I'm reading that line, but I don't feel very confident in that reading. But we're left with this very striking and chilling image of clouds moving in their direction as though they're animate objects with a will or a desire about where to go, and moving without the wind, which, as far as I know, and I don't know much about meteorology, you can't do that. The wind is the thing that moves the clouds. But the movement of the clouds then is something that seems inevitable, like the expectation of death that's there. So perhaps the clouds are signifying death within this poem. As I said at the beginning, I mean, it's a very striking poem and a challenging poem, and one that I think I shed some light on, but there's certainly much more to say, and you could probably hear that I was not super confident in my own interpretation of it, despite getting a second shot at this video. But hopefully you find something in there that is worth ruminating on. And Wallace Stevens is one who invites us into that challenge. And so we will revisit him at some point throughout this series. In the meantime, may peace be with you all.